Hey everybody, it's Troy. Just wanted to start a lecture today on getting you prepared for the next class, which is IT 3530 Advanced Windows Administrator. And that's where we're going to be working in server, with the servers. And so we're going to have some new terminology. Some of it you may not recognize. Some of you guys have experience with this already, so you've heard it, you know what it is. A lot of you probably don't, so this is a good video to watch to kind of help get you prepared for the next class. And it's also something that you could watch multiple times. Take notes if I say something that you don't understand, and then Google it. I can't stress enough how important it is in IT to take notes, and to take notes by hand, because in IT you will always hear somebody talk about something that you've never heard of, or in terms that you've never heard it. And instead of getting out your phone and typing yourself a note, you want to have a little notebook that you write things down in. Now, the reason you don't want to use your phone is really simple. And I know this sounds crazy coming from somebody who's teaching you about technology. But when I have a new employee and I'm telling that employee something and I look over and they're typing on their phone, first thing that comes to my mind is they're texting. And you don't ever want to have to explain that you're really not texting, because they may or may not confront you about it. They might just keep that in the back of their mind and say, this kid was texting when I was trying to teach him stuff. So I always think it's best to have a little notebook in your pocket. I still have a notebook that I carry around that I've had since I started in IT. And that's how I learned almost everything that I know, is I would make notes. I had no idea what the notes meant. I just put down the words they were using. And then I would go online and I would check to see what this stuff meant. What does this mean? What is this? And then you start to build your knowledge on that a little bit at a time. So, first thing we need to do is we need to kind of give you guys an idea of what a little bit of a diagram on a network. So I'm gonna do this over here real quick in front of you. This is the one I want. Yeah. So any network, first thing you're gonna have is going to be right here, and it's going to sit here, and this is going to be your firewall. All right. We won't deal with firewalls yet, except for software ones. But this is a physical firewall, and you'll learn about that in some of your other classes. For the physical firewall, of course, the next step that it goes to is you have your switches. And then the switches from here, you're going to have different VLANs that come out. These are VLANs. Okay. And this is a way to segment your network so that it's easier to manage and easier to secure. Now, on one of these VLANs, someplace along the line, you are going to have generally speaking, you're going to have what they call host server. And this is virtualized. So, and then on that host server, you're going to have a bunch of VMs. It just a bunch of images of servers or whatever you need. I had 2 physical hosts where I work, and a physical host is just a physical server. I had 2 of them, and they each held 80 servers apiece. Okay? Now, within these servers, and this is where we get into the class stuff, there's a few servers you're going to really want to know about, but the very first one you're going to want to know about, let's draw this out here. This is it's a domain controller. Okay? And a domain controller is what it really sounds like. And that is that this is kind of the central point of a Microsoft-based network. All right? By Microsoft-based network, I mean a network where you have Microsoft servers and you have Microsoft clients. And the domain controller is responsible for a few different things. One thing it's responsible for is DNS. All right, so that's the domain naming service, and that's what helps you with IP addresses and URLs internally. That's important. The DNS on here should not be accessible from the outside, and it shouldn't point your outgoing data anywhere except to another DNS server on the outside of your network. And that's a security issue. Okay? The next thing it's going to have on here is called Active Directory. Active Directory is really how you secure a network through permissions, and in a minute I'm going to actually pull one up and show it to you. But Active Directory is going to be what you use for this, and some people call it the AAA. Okay, and it stands for Authorization, Access, and Accounting. Now, this accounting isn't accounting like with money. This is accountability, like who's on your system and who's not. The authorization and access part is how people access your network. Okay. And then the last thing that it has on here that's important for us to talk about is group policy. Whoops. So, sorry. Group policy at the network level is, or the domain level, I should say, is really important because it allows you to control what's happening on all the machines so that everything is the same, and so that you don't have people doing crazy stuff on your machines that you don't want them to. Like setting up the Microsoft PIN instead of, and then using that instead of a password. Biggest problem is that if that person leaves, you don't know the PIN, it becomes a real pain in the butt to get around, okay? And so group policy, you guys remember we did a group policy section, and we talked about all the different group policies you can come up with, and there's hundreds or thousands of them, and we'll explore those in the class. But just know that you have a domain controller, and it's commonly known as your DC, course, DNS, that's the common name for it. Active Directory, AD. And group policy, a lot of times you'll see it written as GPO, which is group policy object. And we'll get into that just in a little bit so you kind of understand how all of this stuff works together. Okay? So let me get another sheet here. Okay. So within Active Directory, so within, oops, sorry. So in Active Directory, you're going to have several things in here, and they're organized, okay? So the first thing that you have is called a tree. And the tree is represented, it's a domain. And a domain is a network or multiple networks that use a certain naming convention that the company has purchased. So if you think of Microsoft, right? That is a domain that Microsoft owns. All right? They may own others too, but this is one of their domains, I'm sure. And within this domain, you might have a whole bunch of stuff. So, in other words, within the Microsoft.com, you might have O365 .microsoft.com or SharePoint .ms.com. You get the point, all right? So this is their domain. And so in Active Directory, now you have the Microsoft.com domain. Now, within this domain, all right, think of domain like you would in a fantasy novel or Lord of the Rings or whatever. You know, this is the domain of the elves or domain of the whatever else you have in that movie. Now, you have to be able to organize this, because if you don't, it's just a huge mess, and then it becomes a security issue because you can't control things. So the first thing that you need to know about, and there's a bunch of different things, but I just want you to focus on basics right now. The first thing we have here is what's called an organizational unit. And you guessed it, they call them OUs. All right? Then the next thing you're going to have are objects. And you can probably have a bunch of different kinds of objects, but we'll talk about two right now. Two objects that you have will be users and computers. And it's important to understand that users and computers, they're not the same. Even though a computer might be assigned to an individual and your naming convention for it might name it their name and something else. But these are two very different concepts. And we'll find out why in a minute. Now, under these, in computers, you can even break it down more. You could have servers. You could have laptops. You could have desktops. You might even do an object group of printers, right? There might be another OU up here, printers. And then you'd put all your printers in there, especially if they're connected to the network. Users, generally speaking, there's only one type of user account, and that's going to be what's called a domain user. Everybody in the company is a domain user. Domain user is the most basic form of user that you have, and it does not, in and of itself, it really doesn't grant them any permissions within the network, unless you grant it a permission. So it's in here in the domain user. You're not really going to have a lot of information other than just the basic information about your user. And remember, we're going to talk about group policy. So keep this in mind while we're doing it. Now, you will have one other subgroup in users, and that's going to be network admins. And these are the guys that have the keys to the kingdom, okay? That's what you guys ultimately are going to end up doing, all right? Now, depending on your company, if it's a really big company, you may break that down even further. Break it down by, what they can do and things like that, like what their job is. This is an important concept to understand. Everybody's a domain user. Everybody has a domain account. Even if you are the director of IT, you have a domain user account. Now, let's say that the accounts are done by, let's say, first name, last initial, or first initial, last name. Your name's John Fox. So you have J. Fox, and it's going to be your fully qualified domain name is jfox dot whatever the company name is. Say it's Acme .com. That's your fully qualified domain name, jfox.acme.com. All right. Now, let's say J. Fox is the director of IT. Okay. So now, J. Fox needs an account that we're going to give him permissions to, because we don't want him to use his network administrator account for just everyday stuff. We want him to use his user account, especially when you go out browsing on the internet. You'd much rather lose credentials for just a domain user than you would a domain admin, for obvious reasons. So what you do then is you'd give him a new account. So this guy might be, now he'll have a second account, and it'll be jfox-a. So you have jfox, and now you have jfox-a for administrator. JFox goes into users, domain users. JFox-A goes into network admins. Okay? It's important to remember this concept. You might want to make a note of it. You always want to make sure that your admins have 2 accounts and that it's specified within company policy and whatnot as to when they can use those and when they should use the regular ones. Okay? Now, the next thing you're going to have is what are called security groups. Okay? Now, the security groups, if you remember back to when we did setting up a file structure, and then we did permissions, right? And we granted permissions. We did share permissions. We gave everybody access, and then we went into Ntfs in the advanced, and we could give people really specific permissions. All right. Now, within when you're doing these permissions, you're going to be accessing and using these security groups. You don't want to do it just individually from the user, the domain user, because it's too difficult to manage. All right. So what you do is you come up with security groups. So you might have role groups. You might have computer access groups. You might have application access. You can have whatever you want. It doesn't matter. The key is when you get down to this, the only time you're ever really going to enter an individual will be in their role group. So you might have role-IT, role-HR, role-sales, roles-accounting. And you might have a ton of them. I mean, you might have a lot. Then, with each one of these, this is where you are going to add the individual objects, user objects. Okay? This is where you're gonna put them. Now, you see I have all these other groups like computer access, application access, and within these you would have you have groups like your application. You might have Duo. Maybe you have Office 365. Maybe you have some kind of a training application. Now, not everybody needs access to every application except for network admins. Not everybody needs access to every computer on the network. All right? So if you have computer access, that's usually talking about a server. Like, say you have a test server for your developers. Then this is where you would grant those people access to that server and what they can do. Okay. Now, so we've got all of these different groups and objects and roles and all that kind of stuff. So why do we have all that? Well, it comes down to something really simple. And you need to memorize this. It's called the principle of least privilege. And what this means is you give people just enough access for them to do their job. No more, no less. Just exactly how much they need to do their job. That's why you create these role groups, okay? Because what you're going to do is within a role group, you're going to put everybody in here, okay, in their different roles. And then when you have folders on your network, you have file shares, you're going to use this to grant access to those. Just like here, you're going to put the people into this, you'll put users into computer access, but into the specific subgroup, computer dash test server, computer dash SQL server, and it's going to be for a very specific computer. And then you're only going to give people that need access here. And you can control what kind of access they get. All right? Same with application access. Where I worked, we had a training application that we had purchased, but it only had 25 seats. So you could only have 25 people on there at any given time. And we had 150 people, 200 people in the company. What we would do is every month, I would go into this OU and I would delete all the people that were in there, and then I would add all the new people that I wanted to have access that month. And so then everybody else got deleted, they couldn't get in, and everybody in here could. All right? In the training. And that's all done through your Active Directory and your OUs and your objects. Now, how does group policy fit into all this? Okay. Group policy these are rules that you have for the domain, for the network. Okay? And you do it here so that you don't have to do it for each individual user and each individual computer, because your group policies have to be targeted at something, okay? And that's called the scope. So when you set up a group policy, you have to have a scope. Who is this going to apply to? Now, for example, let's say you're going to do a password policy. Would you put the password policy with users or computers? If you answered users, you're correct. The reason is that if you only did computers, then any other computer in the network this person could go to and get into. All right? So you're going to require the individual to have a password. And then you're going to tell them, what requirements do you have for the password? It has to be 8 characters long. It has to have upper, lower, number, and character. Okay? Whatever you want. Then you have to set the reuse. How often will they have to change their password? And how often can they reuse a password? Okay? So there's a lot of argument right now in the industry about changing passwords and if it's even that secure. And the truth of the matter is, if people use secure passwords, passwords can be secure. But what happens is people don't use those. And so that's where it's kind of gotten its bad rep at, in my opinion. So say you make them change it every 90 days. And you have a use reuse of 24. So they have to go through 24 passwords before they can use their first password again. So instead of people actually thinking up passwords, what they do is they do something like this. My dog, 1. 90 days later, we make them change their password. So what do? My dog, 2. See where this is going, right? Well, the hackers know that this is what you do. And so it makes it really simple to hack your password. And that's why the argument's made that changing your password doesn't make it any safer, because most people just simply increment the last the end piece, and they make it a number and they just increment it by 1. Because they don't want to have to try to remember their password. So that's part of the problem, just so you know. But this password policy is going to be pointed at all of the users. That's the scope. Users. Now, what if you had a policy for updates? How often do we push updates? When are they done? How are they done? What time of day? All that kind of stuff. Would you assign that to a user or to a computer? Well, if you say computer, you're right. The reason you assign it to a computer is because you don't update users. The updates are applied to a computer. That way, you know that computer's getting the updates. Wouldn't make sense to apply it to a user. Just wouldn't make sense. Okay. So now you kind of understand this a little bit, just basic stuff. Let's take a look at one more thing here before we look at the real stuff. Okay. We discussed file systems in this class, and we discussed Ntfs. I don't know why that did that. So, we discussed file systems and we discussed Ntfs. And that's really the most secure file system out there right now. And it does a really good job of securing your stuff. So let's say that you've decided you're going to have some shared files and folders in your company. So you're going to set up a server that's a file share server. And on this file share server, you're going to have a whole bunch of folders. And people are going to be able to access those folders. So you have your first folder, and it's just called Acme file share. Now, when you go to your Ntfs permissions, you remember you get that little dialog box where you type in people's names. What you're going to do is you're going to make sure that it has the domain user group. Okay. Now, remember, these file permissions will cascade waterfall down, and they will inherit down. So you have to make sure that you know what you're doing in changing these, or else these guys are going to end up with tons of permissions. You just want them to be able to access this folder so that they can see the rest of the folders. Because the rest of the folders come down here, and they might be, this might be IT, and you might have one here for sales, and you might have one for admin. You might have one for marketing. Okay. Now, you don't want these to inherit from the one above it. That's not what you want. So what you're going to do is you're going to go inside the IT folder and you're going to open up the NTFS, and then you're going to add the role-IT. And that's it. It's the only one that's going in there. So nobody else can access this. In fact, what'll happen is if somebody's in IT, when they go to this and open it, right? Because they're going to use a UNC path to get here. And we'll talk about that in a second. But it's only going to be for IT people. So when they open this folder, if they don't have permissions anywhere else, they'll only see the folder they have permissions to. The others don't even appear for them. So here, we're going to do role, sales. You guys get it. You guys get the picture, right? That way, we're implementing the policy of least privilege by doing this. All right? And a UNC path is something that you put into File Explorer, and I'll show you in a minute. And the reason you do that is you don't want people accessing everything on that server. You just want them to have access to the bare minimum, principal least privilege, that they need to do their job. Okay? All right. Now let's take a look at a domain controller. All right. So, this is a domain controller. It doesn't look any different from a regular server. Okay? Except that you have different features. Well, here's Active Directory. Now, you can see here is a tree. And it's called tasem.me. That's the name of my domain. Underneath, you have a whole bunch of stuff, okay? A lot of these are they're there by default, okay? But you'll see we have tasem users, and here's all the users. Now this was, I don't know why somebody put this in here, that was stupid. Okay, I'll have to move it. I don't know why they put that in there. Anyway, when you're in my class, you'll actually go into this Active Directory machine and you're going to add your own Active Directory user. Okay, so here are all of our, right here, these are our user objects, and they're the most basic user objects there are. They're tasem users. Tasem admin, just me. All right. Now, when you get to role groups, you have all these different role groups that my classes have come up with. If we go to role IT and we go to members, we have names of people. These are user objects. And then we say, okay, now we see who's in here. And if any of these people quit or get fired or get promoted, then we can disable their account, and we can do it in one place, and we know that it will disable all of their permissions because we did this by role group, not by individuals, and certainly not by local accounts. If you're doing local accounts, then you're going to get fired. If you click here, member of, what are they a member of? Okay, well, so we gave them access to a computer that's called ut. It should be DHCP. They named it wrong. DCHP? No. .01. And then the file share -IT. Okay? That's what they have permissions to. Easy. If you go to sales, nobody. I wonder if they deleted themselves. Okay, so here's a user in here. Now, I'll show you how you add a user and how you know that you added it correctly. So we click on add and we get this dialog box. It wants me to enter the name of an object. All right? So this is the help desk. So we're going to put in some names of people. Let's see if we have any Johns in my I gotta be able to spell, in my Active Directory. Nope. What about Thomas? Yes, we have a Thomas. So the way that we know we got it right is the name appears, it's underlined, and then in here it also shows what they are listed in their user profile. So we know that this is right. So we can click OK. Now the person's in there. That's simple. Okay? Apply. Okay. Go to IT again. We'll add. We'll put me in here. Now, the reason I'm going to show you this is because it's going to do something different now. So it pulls up two accounts. It pulls up my admin account and it pulls up my user account. So we want my user account to be accessing this. So now he's in there. Okay. So this is how you are going to add FTS permissions. All right. So let me move this down and try to remember which. No. Trying to remember which one. I'm going to pause and I'll be right back. Okay, so I wasn't able to get I had to rename the file share server and reboot it, and it's not rebooting, so it doesn't matter. The dialog box that we saw up here, right? It's exactly that dialog box when you add somebody is exactly what you're going to see. So if I were to go in here and let's say that I just go to let's see, file shares, and then I go to accounting, properties, sharing. That's your UNC path. Remember we talked about UNC path? This is what people use to get there. And they put that right here in File Explorer in the window. Okay? Go to Advanced Sharing. Okay. Alright, so they gave it to everybody. All the administrators. So now I have it and the accounting people have it. Okay? We'll delete them for a second. Okay. This way I can show you how this actually works, because somebody's already done it. And that's one of the things you'll get to do in my classes. To middle to end, I turn you guys loose and you can do whatever you want in here. So it's kind of fun. Let's get rid of these guys. Okay. So now when we go in here, go to Properties. Sharing. Now one of the problems that they've done here is they have given just the administrators. So remember, the most restrictive permission will apply. So if you did this, you gave them access, just the administrators. When the role IT group went in there to use it, this would override them. So we want to add let's see, we want to add everyone just for fun. Now the only reason I'm doing that is so that I can restrict the permissions here. So when I go to security, what I'm going to do now is it's allowing me to edit the permissions. Well, what I want to do is I want to add my role group. So again, we get this dialog, and what you're going to want to do is type something in here that you know will pull up your Active Directory lists like this. Okay? So now we're going to check the names. Okay, so we have all these role groups we can use. And this is accounting, so we just want the accounting group. Boom, there it is. Okay. Okay. And we'll give them full control over this thing, because we want them to be able to do whatever it is they do. We don't, as IT admins, we don't want to have to get in there and make a bunch of changes and stuff. Apply it. Okay. Close. So now, if we go back in here, let's grab its UNC path really fast. And then, I'm going to try something real quick. So this server is part of the domain. So what I'm going to do is go in here. Right? This is my File Explorer. And put my UNC path in. So do you see what's happened? It took me to that server, to that folder. And there's nothing inside the folder. So if we go back, the way you would test this is go back here. Wait, here it is. Let's go file shares, accounting, and whoops. And let's drop a text doc in there. Okay. Now you see that help documents there? So I can access that file share from anywhere in my network just through this UNC path. But notice you only can access the folder that you have permissions for, right? That's the only one you can access. It's the one you have permissions for. So anyway, that's it for this lecture. I hope this kind of helps you start to think about what maybe you do know or what you don't know and what you need to learn or become familiar with before the next semester. And it will give you something to kind of grab onto to see why we've been doing the things we've been doing. They're building blocks headed towards what we're going to be doing with servers. So with that said, that's it for today, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have questions, let me know. But watch this as many times as you need to and enjoy it. Bye.